today's podcast, I'm honored to share the virtual stage with a good friend of mine. He's a former carrier executive, InsurTech entrepreneur, educator, executive coach, and most recently, the founder of Propel Day, Greg Bailey.
Let's go. Let's go.
Hi, I'm Miguel Edwards, and I'm the founder and CEO of FiveM Consulting, LLC. We're a boutique management consulting firm specializing in the insurance technology and operations space. This is our YouTube series, and we call it InsurTech Mastery, where we like to discuss interesting trends in the insurance industry, risk management, and executive leadership development. If you like these topics, please hit the subscribe button below. So let's go get into the show. I think about the day we met, and I remember being in Iowa. This was back when I was at Allstate. I was very, very involved in the Global Insurance Accelerator based in Des Moines, and we just got all introduced. And you were doing some really, really fascinating stuff. Specifically around Denim Labs, Denim Social. I figured that'd be a really good place to start. Where we met and kind of how you got into that piece. And please also too feel free to weave in some other history from your career, because I think one of the things as we get into this that our audience is going to want to know is what exactly are some of the things that makes an insurance carrier executive transition into an entrepreneur. And in fact, something I want to know about, right? Because I'm on that same journey. So let's go back to that day in Iowa when we first met.
Thank you for the invitation. Wonderful to be on this show with you. So I appreciate you and the invitation and the opportunity to be with you today. And hopefully through this conversation, there'll be just a couple of nuggets that I'll impart. I think typically, right, the teacher learns more than the students. And so that's probably me in this case. I'll learn a lot more than I'm able to impart. But you're exactly right. Back in the day, I think it was probably, I'm going to guess, around 2017 or 2018.
Sounds right.
In that time frame, I was building an InsurTech startup, one of the OG InsurTech startups, as I like to say. I founded Denim out of my home here in the Des Moines Metro back in 2015. Raised some capital, built a team, had an office in the downtown business district, and like you, was a mentor for many years at the Global Insurance Accelerator. And so I had come out of, about an 18, 20-year track record of moving from a couple of different carriers around the country in various corporate marketing roles. And so I'd been vice president of marketing, strategic marketing at Pacific Life, based in Southern California. We then relocated to Des Moines, Iowa Metro. I became the senior VP and chief marketing officer for the largest indexed annuity writer in the country, and that's Athene, previously Aviva, of course. And then had this brainchild to become an entrepreneur. And in 2015, took that leap. I call it the break-free leap out of corporate. And we'll get into that, I'm sure, a little bit later. But
sure.
Started Denim, and then you were gracious enough to come out to Des Moines on an October day around 2017 or 2018 to participate in a summit that we were doing, a conference, a one-day conference called Denim Summit. And some of your listeners hopefully remember those days when we put those Denim Summit events on out here in Des Moines. And we loved having a community of people, roughly 100 folks usually, that would come out, carrier representatives, technology people, innovation, et cetera. And I recall you were on stage with some others sharing your thoughts from, kind of your perspective in the industry and the Allstate perspective as well. So exciting times. Nowadays, I've since, I'm going on 9 years, I guess, being out of the corporate world. And we'll get into more about the details of kind of my entrepreneurial track, but that's how it all got going back in the day.
I remember, meeting you and your team and talking a little bit about Denim, and it reoriented me quite a bit to the shift in advertising and targeting and marketing, and it really speaks to an interesting topic that I want to get into now, which is the seismic demographic shifts that we're seeing in general, right? And I think we thought a lot about that seismic shift from a consumer perspective as boomers are aging out and millennials are our new customer, et cetera. And by the way, it's funny, I always skip the Xers, right? Because we all know statistically, we're insignificant in the overall grand scheme of things. Something happened where there aren't enough of us. So you go through this massive demographic shift on the consumer side, but we're also seeing that now play out in the workforce, right? The boomers are taking off now, they're retiring en masse. we're seeing now millennials in leadership roles. And you know, and you and I actually in the pre-show, you know, we were lamenting about, you know, the burnout that we're seeing, the need for mentorship. Talk a little bit about, you know, some of the things that you're seeing in that space, specifically as your role as an executive coach, as a mentor, as an educator. What are some of the things you're seeing and some of the unmet needs that may concern you?
We track Gallup, and I know a lot of your audience is going to be familiar with the Gallup organization. We track Gallup quite closely as well. I'm finalizing the process right now this month of becoming a certified Gallup strengths coach around the Clifton Strengths Assessment. But Gallup recently came out with some of their research talking about how that employee stress levels are one of the key things to watch here in 2024, one of the current topics or events in the worker dynamic. Globally right now, we talked about how 44% of employees around the globe talk about how they're at significant stress levels in the workplace. The worst situation is in the U.S. The U.S. talks about, and Canada is combined in this stat, U.S. and Canada, and our stats are even worse at 52% of all employees surveyed talked about how they've experienced a lot of stress within the most recent day. And so that's a key topic when we talk about burnout, when we talk about employees get in their heads that, the grass is going to be greener on the other side. Or it also evokes this other notion about employee engagement or disengagement, maybe is the better way to think of this. Another element of this could be, do employees trust their managers or do employees trust their leaders? So all of these topics really kind of get balled up together. I might say, because I'm looking out my office window here at roughly a couple of feet of snow on the ground. Maybe we put these all packaged tightly into a nice tight snowball, and that might hurt. You know, that could have drastic implications on how employers go, not just this year but beyond, right? And so these are topics that I think insurance companies, but employers at large have to be focused on.
So we've got this concept here of this mountainous stress, specifically in the middle management space that we're seeing. And then you add to that all that we're seeing in the news around the layoffs, these tech companies laying off people in droves. And it's funny, one of the things that I think a lot about is, this kind of this whipsawing that we do. I was a beneficiary in 2020 of all of the free money and investments that we got, when money was essentially free, interest rates at zero, whatever, all this capital investment. And then we get to these hard times. And then now companies are saying, oh my gosh, that's all now amortizing. What do we do? Expense cuts. And so now here we are. And so now it's that's an interesting concept where we've got a combination of stress, which probably isn't helped much by, this notion of, am I going to have my job next week, looming on top of that. And so now we've got a scenario where folks are having to reinvent themselves. And I'm thinking about my own story in that very space where I've got to reinvent myself. And I think I'm probably in that stress category, right? There's got to be a better way. I've got to be able to earn a living and make a difference without being shackled by enormous stress. And then here, I think, is where you come in and you fill in an enormous gap. How do you bridge that transition from being a corporate Joe and taking the leap? And so talk to me a little bit about Propel Day and all that you bring to the table with your product and the Confident Consultant, which was a fascinating read. So give me some detail on that.
Well, thanks for the tee up there. You're right. Because of all of this context that we just laid out, right? It's a difficult and complex worker environment right now, both for leaders, but also for managers and employees that you've succinctly laid out. And so we've created Propel Day. Our mission is to help business leaders, entrepreneurial consultants, and fractional executives to do their best work and live their best life, right? So it's not one or the other, it's both and do their best work and live their best life. How do we do that? We do that through three things. Number one, education. Number two is community. And number three is executive coaching. And so I've talked a little bit about executive coaching. It's a pretty traditional model, kind of a one-to-one executive coaching experience. This notion of being a Gallup certified strengths coach and leveraging the Gallup organization's Clifton Strengths 34 assessment and a lot of that activity is what we do there. We do that for carriers. We have some carrier clients currently, and other industries as well, other types of mid and large companies typically. On the education side of what we do, we provide and build digital courses or online courses that are accessible and for sale by the public at large to be able to learn various topics. You mentioned our confident consultant assets that we're putting forward. And so in February, we'll be launching the Confident Consultant digital course. And this will be a 5-module, roughly, digital course to help those who are what we call fractional curious, or they are consultant curious. And maybe they're still working in a corporate environment, but they distrust their employer. They think there's a better path. They'd rather work on their own objectives rather than someone else's objectives. And they're thinking about taking that break-free leap, that leap into the entrepreneurial consultant or fractional executive realm. And this course is designed for both folks like that, plus folks who have recently become an entrepreneurial consultant or independent consultant or a fractional executive on their own. And so there's kind of that early stage of being on their own type of course here. So we're excited about that. We've recently put out a free new resource. It's a PDF download that people can grab as well. I'll tee that up at the end, but it is called the Confident Consultant Checklist. And it is a thorough, several point 5-page long document that kind of walks you from A to Z through the different steps or the checklist needed to consider thinking about making that ultimate decision to leave the life of corporate and go the life of a business owner, of an entrepreneur as a consultant or a fractional exec. So we're excited about all of that. The community aspect is coming soon. It'll come out this spring. We'll launch that aspect this spring, but excited about all of those assets and all that value and help that we can provide in support for this new worker realm, right? This new worker reality that, hey, not every worker is going to be in a corporate setting for their entire career.
Right.
In fact, you'll hear me, rather than hear me call it a career, you'll likely start hearing me call this someone's professional journey. And my professional journey, your professional journey mimic this, right? We were in a traditional corporate setting for many, many years, got to executive level stature or positions. And ultimately, for whatever reason it was, in my case, it was kind of a blindsided, I got let go, kind of blindsided situation 9 years ago. And here I am. And I've been an entrepreneur ever since. So, and I should point out, I've been in this role of being an entrepreneurial consultant and a fractional executive multiple times now. So it's an exciting world. And we're excited to help a lot of folks with this.
One of the things that you said, which is kind of interesting, is that when you are ready to make the decision to make the leap. Now that's interesting if you make that decision, but what we're seeing oftentimes is that people are blindsided, as you described. And what ensues oftentimes is a crisis of confidence. And, what am I going to do next? And am I qualified to do this or that, the other thing? As you think about some of the folks that you've mentored, as you think about some of those journeys, maybe even your own, what tips, what advice do you have for someone who's laying in the dumps, crisis of confidence? I got let go. It wasn't because, it's easy to say, well, it was a corporate decision, so on and so forth. It is what it is. But what happens when you actually feel like, man, was I at the bottom of that list? And, was I really thought of that point? What advice, what counsel do you have to a really strong professional that has their confidence rocked all of a sudden by a blindsided move like that, and they have to pick themselves up and do something brave?
Such a great tee up and such a great question. And it's where we start the entire conversation with folks. It's about the mindset. And the mindset is often missed. We oftentimes think about jumping right into, oh, I know which tool to use, or I know which formula or which system or which strategy to help my clients get what they're wanting to accomplish. All of that is very important. But the actual mindset of the confidence level or the can-do attitude, I like to refer to it as operating in the gain, not in the gap. And this is a concept that I've borrowed from an author named Dan Sullivan and Dr. Hardy. And this concept of operating in the gain says, hey, look, we should look backwards and measure our progress based on where we have been and where we have come from.
Right.
Not measuring our progress or our accomplishments based on our ultimate ideals or aspirations. Those are often like the horizon. The further we chase them, the further they move out, right? So if we measure our progress based on where we have come from, kind of a backwards view, we've gone from 0 to 20. And maybe our ideal and our aspiration is out here at 30 or 40. But we have still made significant progress. Instead, what we often do as humans, we say, hey, we started at 0 and our ideal is out here at 30 or 40, and I only achieved, and I'm only at 20, I'm losing.
Right.
And losing ends up in here as a defeatist mentality. Yeah. And it sucks the life out of all of us. This concept of operating in the gain, that in fact, in that equation that I just laid out, in fact, we had actually gained 20 steps, right? We'd gone from 0 to 20. We recognize that our aspiration is to get to 30 or 40 eventually, but we should be confident and we should feel good and we should be happy with the progress made. And so these types of, I don't know, I'll lightly phrase them as psychology, right, of being an entrepreneur, are those types of tools that we help teach and educate folks around not just the craft of being an independent consultant or a fractional executive. We certainly do that, the how to do this, but also the mindset. And that's where we often we start there. We talk about mindset. We talk a lot about the freedoms and the flexibility and the happiness and the fulfillment that being in this entrepreneurial consultant or fractional executive realm provides people that maybe the corporate, more 9 to 5 world did not offer.
I want to share with you what just painted in my mind as you were kind of going through that and maybe just get your reaction. But I guess up until I made my transition, I failed to think about my corporate job as a stage toward a broader career. And instead, I kind of thought of my corporate job as my life. I was defined by my corporate job, the position I held, and I viewed it as the kind of the totality of my entire career life, as opposed to looking at it as a stage and an opportunity to get from 0 to 20, as you just mentioned, which was the critical mass that I needed to then break out and do something different to then get to 30 and 40. I needed that
the break-free leap.
Yes, exactly. So you just painted an amazing picture for me. And, dude, where were you when I was making my transition? Right. I mean, and by the way, I mean, I think for me, the punchline is for folks that are in transition, they need to find that mentor that can talk them through this, because there's no amount of self-reflection, I believe, that without the right voices around you and support around you can help you, right? And you'll stew indefinitely. And so that's kind of how I've put all this together in my mind based off of what you said. 0 to 20. And by the way, I would be worthless as a consultant without that 0 to 20. I wouldn't know anything. I would have no experience.
Right. That's the experience. That's the expertise. That's the network of other individuals and people, all of that put together. There's one other quick concept on this notion, which is this doesn't just relate to our professional realm, right? This relates to our families, our children, our friends, our networks, that operating in the gain is an optimist, a glass half full point of view, right? Operating in the gap is saying, hey, look, I've fallen short. I'm no good. I'm a loser, whatever that self-talk is that enters our heads. And so catching ourselves, look, it happens to me, it happens to all of us. But we try to minimize, and we coach folks to minimize the amount of time that they're spending in the gap. And instead, asking ourselves an important question. And here's the question. When we are faced with a negative situation, an outcome that didn't go our way, we should, or maybe it was a situation where the plan didn't go according to plan. We should stop and mentally ask ourselves, what does this situation make possible that otherwise would not have been possible? I'll give you just a kind of this is a real life example. This morning, there's a Panera coffee shop not too far from where we live. And this morning I had a 9 a.m. meeting scheduled to go over there and meet someone, a business person, and also a pastor over at this coffee shop. And I show up, and it gets to be about 10 after 9, and it gets to be about a quarter after 9, and I'm texting this individual. They haven't shown up. And it turned out that we got our calendars mixed up. They thought it was at a different time and so forth, and we couldn't have the meeting. They weren't there. Luckily, I had brought a book with me. I enjoy reading good books. And I took about 30 minutes then to have a great cup of coffee and fill my brain with some content and some reading that was really fantastic information. I'm glad I had that time. And that was what was made possible by the unfortunate event and situation that I wasn't able to meet the gentleman that I was there to meet with. And so just looking and reframing, it's a reframing exercise at the end of the day is what this is. It is an opportunity to take something that's a negative or something that didn't go according to plan or something that we feel like, gosh, I sure messed that up or I screwed that up. And we reframe it, moving from what I call the gap into what we refer to as the gain. And I ended up gaining by reading the book and having time that I otherwise wouldn't have had.
I love it. So based on that and lots of the other discussions that we've had, Greg, it seems like what you've done really is kind of codify an approach and a way of thinking and structures to making this transition. I guess that all that's embedded and built into the Confident Consulting course. Could you go into a little bit more detail in terms of, kind of what's all included in some of the hows and the whats that go into that learning experience?
Love to. And like I said, in mid-February, we'll have some announcements come out that folks can sign. Well, in fact, they should sign up on our email list if they haven't, because that's how we communicate most of the time, or find our LinkedIn page or our Facebook page or Instagram or whatever. But Confident Consultant, the name is just as it says, right? It's straightforward. That if you think about the very nature of being a consultant or a fractional executive, confidence is a key element of the deliverable. Look, no one hires a not confident or a lacking confidence consultant.
Right.
Now, we could have also said competent, right? Because they wouldn't hire someone lacking in competence either.
Right.
But we're going to assume the fact that somebody has taken this bold step to become an entrepreneurial consultant or a fractional executive, they have the experience, they have the expertise, they have the competence. Now, not everybody has the confidence.
Right.
And so a couple of the modules I'll just quickly walk you through. So there is a module about assessing whether or not making and taking that break-free leap, leaving the corporate job and going to life as an entrepreneur and a consultant, fractional exec. Is that right for you? There's a module and a process that we walk folks through around that, specifically an assessment that we've created about that. So there is a section about, ultimately, are you going to do this as a side gig type things? A lot of folks will do that. Or for other folks, they'll say, hey, look, I was laid off and I'm ready to just go ahead and start this process because as I like to say, I'm in the garden pasture anyway. Right. I'm walking around the garden pasture. I'm not in a 9-to-5 right now. So we walk folks through that and how to become their own boss. There's another module where we go deep, and I'm just kind of hit and miss here, where we talk through the marketing, business development, and client acquisition. Huge part of this process, right? And so in Confident Consultant, the course, we start that process. Now, we'll have another course coming in a couple of months where we'll dive deep and go full book just on that formula and that process. But we'll give the starting blocks for how to do that in Confident Consultant. And then there is a module specifically about the topics that I was just talking about, which is about mindset shift. It's talking about how to achieve freedom and happiness and fulfillment. And we talk folks through that and how to get the mindset, how to have confidence even when things don't go your way, how to keep how to build and keep the momentum that's needed when you're in business for yourself. So that's a little bit of a snapshot. We'll also have several bonuses. We're going to have things like the tech tools needed to get your website and all the other things set up to be able to do your marketing engine, setting up automations. So we'll have cheat sheets and worksheets and things like that, corresponding to, if you're brand new to this, and you're not naturally a marketer, you're not familiar with all these different tools. How do you do that? We'll have other bonuses that we'll provide, for example, like a community aspect and some live access to me throughout the course for certain folks that want to opt in for that. So we're excited about it. The course will be live on February 26th, but we're going to run a 10-day pre-sale, or just think of it as a online open cart for about 10 days prior to February 26th. So look forward to mid-February, I guess is the point here.
Got it. Awesome. And even listening to you deliver that, I'm gaining so much kind of knowledge in terms of billing myself as an entrepreneur. If I may, Greg, I wanted to add a couple of other things to the kind of the list of challenges, and perhaps it's it's good for our listeners and maybe even content for you to consider for your course. But if it's not already there, of course, one of the challenges, love your reaction to this, that I faced is when I took my leap, and I'm still getting tempting calls by the recruiters. Hey, why don't you come be the CIO of this company? And why not try this out? And it was kind of interesting because there's this dichotomous thought process. One side of it says, dang, a paycheck would be really nice right now while I'm kind of sitting here counting the money and, how long is this going to last, so on and so forth. But then on the other side is, what the heck is going to be different with that role? What is the CIO of another insurance company really going to feel like that's going to be materially different than my past two CIO roles? And is that going to somehow give me what has been missing? And you keep saying freedom. You keep saying that. And it's funny. I've got an idea of what that means for me. What does that mean for you and your clients when you talk about this freedom of being a consultant and entrepreneurship? Because that's a dynamic. It's hard to put a value on it until you have it. That's right.
Boy, it's so well said that you just teed that up that way, because I equate freedom then translate to happiness. Okay. And so if in our professional journey, look, fulfillment and happiness are goals, right? Those are aspirations that I have, that if in my professional career journey, I can figure out happiness and fulfillment. Fulfillment is around the work itself, right? Like, hey, I feel like I'm doing a good job, and
right.
I've got great feedback from clients or customers or whatever that is. And happiness then is translated back to ultimately, though, the freedom to be able to do things like work with the people that I choose to work with, but not work with the people I don't choose to work with.
Oh, yeah.
Right? In the corporate world, in the 9-to-5 world, we don't choose who. Now, granted, like the roles you've been in and the roles I've been in the past, we can hire and so forth but for the majority of folks, that's not the case.
Right.
So work with the people. We call that people freedom. There's this notion of legacy freedom. You have children, I have children. And legacy freedom is this concept that we talk about, which is what legacy do we want to leave those who are after us and our children, our family? And do we want to leave a legacy that where in my past, I'm sure it's not unlike your past, where when my children were small, I was a corporate executive. I was kind of a rising corporate executive star, and I did not spend a lot of time at home.
That's right.
I was based out of Southern California for a period of that time, and I traveled the country, and I was on a lot of airplanes, and they saw Dad as being someone who went to the airport with a suitcase and and flew to the Midwest or the East Coast or wherever I was going, and then 3 or 4 or 5 days later came back home.
Right.
And we got to spend some time on the weekends. Now, legacy freedom looks a lot different.
Right.
My office right here is in my home, and so when my in fact, here in a few minutes, I'll go pick my children up from school today. Now, I have a 16-year-old, and he is driving now. He has a vehicle, but there's 2 feet of snow on the ground, and so I said, it's probably best that you get Dad's 4-wheel drive to come pick you up.
Yeah.
But those are some of the freedoms, right? That legacy freedom looks a lot different now that they see Dad for the last 9 years as an entrepreneur, helping other businesses and helping other individuals to accelerate and elevate their own professional journey.
Yep.
And so, looks a lot different than the 9-to-5 world. So those are two of, there's actually 5 different freedoms that I can kind of walk through, but those are a couple of them that I would highlight.
I love that, Greg. And it's funny. I just had this experience a couple of weeks ago where I had somebody call me up and asked me if I could consult on a job. And it's funny because I turned it down, not because I didn't want to work with this individual, but it's just not my core, and it's just not what I do. And it was really interesting when I got off that call. I realized, man, I just said no. I don't. Like, I can't remember kind of like in my employed life, when I was able to say no and not deal with some repercussion, that type of thing.
Totally.
And so it's a very, very liberating feeling. And at the end of the day, I could have done what they asked me to do. But I felt like it would have stretched me too much. I would have had to learn a lot about that particular topic. And in this particular phase where I've got so much knowledge and something I do know about and I do enjoy doing, let me focus there. Let me focus on my core competency. So really interesting point. Yeah.
One additional thought on this is that back to your original question about how do you interact when you get the inbound call, somebody, a recruiter or an employee, a potential employer saying, hey, look, we'd like you to come be our CIO.
Right.
How do you react? Well, number one, I think the decision is important, right? When you make the break-free leap and you make that decision that, look, no, this is going to in fact be my new path. Make sure you're solid on that. Now, it's not to say that you never, you can't ever do something else, but use that as an opportunity. If you're in fact thinking of yourself and you're going to be a consultant or fractional executive, would they be open to, if they really want you? Yeah. Maybe they just say, hey, look, yeah, we would love to do a 6-month or a 12-month long engagement with you and have you on a 1099 basis as a consultant or a fractional exec, as compared to as a W-2 full-time executive. And so turn it from, hey, they want me as an employee into, hey, I'd love for you to be one of my clients. And I love that. It's just a prospecting opportunity. That's the way we look at it, is it's a fantastic lead, rather than a real kind of like push, pull, tug decision type thing. We look at it as a warm lead, a very, very warm lead. So now not everybody's going to take that approach, right? They may in fact, and let me just add on to that. One other commitment you could make in a context like that is say, hey, look, I would love to work with you for the next 6 months or maybe 12 months. And during that period of time, I'll gladly use my network and assist your company into identifying the right long-term fit for the role. Right. And I've done this in the past where I've been a fractional CMO at an insurance company. I was on a 12-month, this is all the way back in 2015 and 16. And I was on a 12-month contract. And during that period of time, I, led the interview process, ultimately found their new CMO for that company, for that insurance company. That's now been nearly 9 years later, and that CMO is still their CMO today. And you added value on multiple fronts. So that's fantastic. And by the way, what I hear in all of this is really optionality, is really what it is. Optionality to write. Yeah, exactly. I love it. This was an incredible talk. I can't thank you enough for dedicating the time on this. Do me one quick favor though, because I keep saying in Propel Day really fast. Why not let the listeners just a few, and I'll put it in the description below. But why not just tell users or listeners where it is that they can find your content, your website, etc. Yeah, our website is simply propelday.com. Okay. And then that confident consultant checklist that we talked about a moment ago, it's a free resource that we've made available. You can find that at propelday.com/C3. And so propelday.com/C3, and little landing page there, and people can get that checklist. And so encourage folks to go out there. Of course, we're on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook as well, all at Propel Day. So you can find us there as well. Fantastic. Thanks so much for your time, Greg. I can't thank you enough. And thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this show, please hit the thumbs up button and click the subscribe button for more. If there's a particular topic that you'd like me to discuss, please add it in the comments. But until the next time.